All right. Well, 2016, here we are. The economy is up. New York City is booming. Private sector jobs are on the rise, and the unemployment rate is down. But not all New Yorkers are feeling the love. In its annual report by the Community Service Society, the Unheard Third, they tell us about what is happening with New York's most vulnerable low-income earners. So let's look at the numbers. Now, 8 in 10 poor New Yorkers feel stuck or like they are slipping further down, and nearly half of New Yorkers across income groups believe it's not very possible to make it into the middle class. We do know that when the mayor ran, he did speak of a tale of two cities, and we also know that income gap is widening. In the last 50 years, the income gap between those who have and have not in developing countries is the highest that it's been in 50 years. And this also goes across racial lines, as low-income whites are especially pessimistic about the prospects of rising into the middle class. Now, low-income Latinos from the report seem to be faring the worst and are more likely to report multiple hardships. Now, by multiple hardships, we mean problems in finding affordable housing, well-paying jobs, and of course, transportation is always an issue, with 1 out of 3 low-income Latinos reporting that they have trouble just affording transportation. That number as compared to blacks is 19%, and for whites it's 11%. Unpredictable work schedules obviously affects people, creates hardships for low-wage workers. 3 out of 10 low-wage workers report that they are actually given their work schedules 3 days or less before the beginning of the week, which obviously makes it hard to be able to support your family and to plan accordingly. And nearly 1 in 4 low-income respondents on the report say that they have fell behind on their rent or mortgage within the last year. Now, those numbers just sort of crack the surface, but so we can break that all down and really learn and understand what's going on, we go to my co-host, Greg, and our guests.
Thanks, Aaron. We're in the midst of a long, noisy presidential campaign with plenty of talk being directed at those who feel they've been left behind. But it's really state and local policies which have the power to improve their lives, or not. To break down the report and discuss some of its recommended solutions, we want to welcome back Apurva Mehrotra, policy analyst at the Community Service Society of New York. Apurva, thank you very much for being back on BK Live.
Thanks for having me. Good
now, aside, in addition to the slides we just saw, what can you tell us about some of the major findings of your report?
Yeah, well, I think those slides did a pretty good job of covering it. But basically, I think that first point sort of kind of sums things up a little bit, sort of broadly. And this is something that we've seen now for 2 consecutive years in the survey when we ask folks where they feel they are on the economic ladder. And really across income levels. It's not just low-income New Yorkers, but even New Yorkers who are doing okay don't really feel like there's a lot of prospects for economic upward mobility. So around 6 in 10 across the income levels feel like they're stuck. In addition, for folks who are poor or near poor, many feel like, you know, not only are they stuck on the economic ladder, but that they're slipping further down. And these are for folks who are already sort of at the bottom of the spectrum when it comes to income levels. So that's something that we've seen now for a couple of years in a row, and as you mentioned, this is sort of in the midst of sort of kind of what seem to be sort of better economic times when you look at unemployment and private sector job growth and those things. So what that's really sort of pointing to is the fact that the jobs that are being created, they're just not well paying enough.
So what are the jobs currently in New York City in the industries that are where the job growth is happening?
Right now, a really sort of disproportionate amount of the job growth is happening in sort of these low-wage sectors, particularly retail and sort of hospitality. You know, restaurants, accommodation, food services. Those are sort of the 2 major sectors. Also, there's been a lot of job growth in the healthcare industry, and that can be a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of the types of jobs that those are. Some of those are sort of, well-paying jobs, some sort of in the middle, but also even within healthcare, for example, sort of home health aides. That's a sort of an industry or an occupation that's really been booming in the last several years, and those jobs can be incredibly low-paying. So we're seeing a lot of job growth in these low-paying industries, and so what we're seeing is, despite these, the drop in unemployment and the rise in private sector jobs, folks aren't really feeling it in terms of, sort of how they feel they're doing on a day-to-day basis, the amount of hardships that they experience, which, there's been really no drop since the recession. in the recovery of the recession in hardships that people are experiencing.
You keep saying hardships. By hardships, what exactly do you mean?
So we basically poll on a battery of about somewhere around 14, 15 different hardships and ask people whether or not they've experienced these things in the past year. Some examples are whether or not folks have fallen behind in their rent or their mortgage, which can be a big problem, obviously, and in many cases can be a precursor to homelessness when folks are falling behind. We ask whether people are having trouble affording public transportation, whether or not people are often skipping meals, whether or not people are relying on sort of charity assistance, relying on friends and family, moving in with other people, doubling up, which again can also be a precursor to homelessness. And so we're really seeing high rates of low-income folks in the city, even those who are working, experiencing not just one, not just two, in some cases not just three, in some cases 5 or more of these hardships, which can obviously really take a toll on folks.
Now, the report says Latinos are faring worse. Why is that?
You know, that's a good question. That's something that we have thought about a lot.
Thank you.
You know, and yeah, and we've sort of looked into, and honestly, I can't really say that I have sort of an answer that sort of I can say definitively answers that question. We looked at a few things. For one, Latinos do seem to pay more in rent than other low-income folks in the city. Latinos are less likely to be in public housing, but they're actually more likely to be in sort of subsidized, rent-stabilized, rent-controlled housing. So you would think that would perhaps make up for the fact that they're not in public housing as much, but still we see that on average Latinos do pay a little bit more in rent than low-income whites and low-income blacks.
Are we talking about undocumented people? Are we talking about citizens? Is there a reason for that?
We actually see, when we see the issues that Latinos are facing and the hardships that they're facing, we actually see it across the board with both immigrants and native-born Latinos. So it doesn't really seem like the answer lies in the immigrant population sort of faring worse than the native-born Latinos. Even the native-born Latinos also are sort of experiencing these multiple hardships and at rates that are a little bit worse than their peers. So for immigrant Latinos and perhaps native-born as well, there is also the fact that their household sizes are generally bigger. Usually the poverty sort of threshold reflects that, but there might be some sort of, maybe a lack of reporting on true household size or sort of how many people that income is actually meant to sustain.
So what can be done? What are the recommendations that we can glean from this report? Because I have to be honest, I've read a lot of different articles around this subject, and some people were just saying, there's nothing that can be done. They said as long as people want to move to New York City and pay exorbitant rents, as long as we're one of the best places in the world to live, people are always going to come here, and the market will sustain that. What do you say to those people?
Well, there's always something that can be done, and how much of an impact that will have, that will just have to be seen once you get some sort of policies in place. Now, in the report, in the survey, this is one of the main reasons we do this survey is because we want to ask folks, especially low-income New Yorkers, well, what do you guys think should be done? What do you think would really help you get ahead economically? And what we see in the survey, across income levels, even across political party affiliation, is that there are really 2 things that people really want to focus on that they really feel like will help low-income New Yorkers get ahead. One of them is raising the minimum wage. Obviously, that's been a really, sort of hotly debated topic. The governor's come out very supportive of a $15 an hour minimum wage, which we're obviously very happy about. Whether the legislature can make that happen, we'll see. But that's definitely one big thing that I think a lot of New Yorkers think will help low-income folks get ahead. And then the second thing is making college more affordable, and that's sort of approaching it from the other side, whereas with the minimum wage, we're talking about folks sort of in the lowest paying jobs, creating just a higher floor so that if you're working full-time, even if you're in the lowest wage job, you're still not sort of, resigned to living in poverty. With all these hardships, and then on the other side of that is trying to help folks get the skills and the education to get the higher paying jobs, and of course that sort of starts with college. But college at this point has become incredibly.
Between 2010, 2013, even people in New York City that had college degrees are making less.
Yeah, the incomes are sort of, if not going down, certainly stagnant, for the last many years. And folks with higher levels of educational attainment are a little bit immune to that, though, depending on what industries they're in, they may not be seeing a lot of wage growth either. But one thing we're definitely seeing is the cost of college just getting higher and higher and higher, and it's really becoming, especially for low-income families, a real issue with how they can afford to get the education they need to get the higher-paying jobs. So those are sort of the two issues that New Yorkers, again, sort of all stripes, have really pointed to as the things that would help low-income folks get ahead. And we've seen, again, with the minimum wage, the governor has come out strongly in favor of the $15 an hour minimum wage. He's touched on the college affordability issue. There was a story late last year that sort of got leaked about him talking with the Obama administration about perhaps getting a free community college program up here, but there hasn't been that much more talk about that, very few details, so that's something that I think really needs to be addressed.
One thing I thought was interesting about the report is that it said that, not only did it talk to low-income New Yorkers about, the different sort of trials and tribulations and factors among their lives, but it also talked to well-to-do New Yorkers about the trials and tribulations, their concerns, to see where there was a sort of convergence of issues. What were those places where you found those convergences?
Yeah, I mean, really, almost across the board. Again, with the sort of the importance of the raising the minimum wage and college affordability, those were the top two choices out of a list of about 10 to 12 sort of ideas of what could help folks get ahead. Those were the top two choices of both low-income New Yorkers and higher-income New Yorkers. And really, with the other policy issues that we touched on in the survey and in the report, there was really a lot of agreement between low-income New Yorkers and higher-income New Yorkers. Some other things were paid family leave. Now, that's again something else that the governor, just in his State of the State address, came out in favor of. The Assembly passed a bill last year, but the State Senate did not. Now that the governor's come out strongly in support of it, again, we'll have to see if the legislature can act and make paid family leave happen. That's something else that could really help New Yorkers in terms of their job stability and their ability to take care of a newborn child or an elderly parent and still hold on to their jobs and still get paid while they're taking leave to take care of their family. So that's a big issue, and yeah, lots of agreement between low and high income New Yorkers, both groups strongly in favor. As well as something that we've really started polling on only in the last couple of years is affording public transportation, which you mentioned earlier. So we've polled on whether or not folks would like to see sort of a discounted fare program for low-income folks, and again, sort of quite a bit of agreement between low and high-income New Yorkers in favor of a proposal that would give low-income riders a discounted fare. The scheduling issue, again, that you touched on. Again, in agreement between low and high income New Yorkers. Folks want to see the sort of the practice of unpredictable scheduling, reined in, so the folks have a better idea and can plan ahead. Again, something that will help, it'll help low income New Yorkers, more than anyone, because those are the folks who really face that issue. But higher income New Yorkers also recognize it as an issue that and favor proposals that would remedy that problem.
Perfect. Where do people find out more about the Unheard Third report that you've done and other work that you're doing?
Go to cssny.org. That's the website for Community Service Society. You can take a look at all of our publications and advocacy efforts, including the Unheard Third. And
just one more final thing. Who is this report for? And how is it distributed to all the stakeholders?
Well, I think really the report is for, I think primarily sort of policymakers, because, folks, we all know how much influence money has in political elections and the way our politicians govern. But really, it's the low-income folks and folks who are kind of struggling to get ahead that really need their voice sort of elevated, particularly when it comes to things that are getting decided in City Hall and in the state government. So we really want to sort of direct this to the folks who are in positions of power to say, look, this is what people want. This is what low-income people want. You might not hear their voices all the time, but this is a third of the the voting age population that are below 200% of the poverty level here in New York. So their voices really should be heard. So we really want to get the attention of elected officials to let them know that a lot of these proposals that are being debated, there's a wide level of support across income groups, across political party affiliation too. We see support from Republicans as well as Democrats on a lot of these issues. So so we're really trying to get the attention of elected officials so that they know what their constituents really want.
Perfect. Thank you very much for being on BK Live, and thank you, of course, for the work you do repping the Unheard Third.
Thank you, guys.